Hey friends, I'm Leigh Brown and welcome to a special episode of Real Talk with Leigh Brown. Now, this special episode is not just me, it's me and my friend Rob Hahn, because we've started a new podcast and it's called Under All Is the Land. If you've never met Rob, you should know that he has been what we might call an industry provocateur around real estate for a long time. And for well over a decade, Rob has been pointing out some of the systemic issues around real estate, and he's been proven right a lot more than he's gotten credit for. That doesn't mean that we need to sit on our laurels and crow about anything. Rob and I want to talk about big policy issues, big conversations around what's happening with property rights and structural real estate, with the knowledge that we don't have all the answers, but we're willing to have an out loud conversation about really important topics, knowing that at the core of real estate is a patriotic duty to this amazing country and to what property rights has meant to so many American families, and how we're going to make sure there's opportunities in the future. So for this particular episode, we were talking about crime and what it means to have safe communities, what that has to do with fair housing, and frankly, where realtors need to be involved. Now, again, we don't have all the answers. We just want to talk about things out loud. So my hope is that in you listening to this conversation, you will jump over to YouTube, leave us some comments, come on the show, go to your association, go to your brokerage, and start talking about the things that are going to impact real estate for today's citizen and tomorrow's future home buyer. We've got a lot of work to do, y'all. And Rob and I figured we may as well start some of the conversations right out loud and welcome more voices into this space. So enjoy this conversation, this episode 4 of Under All Is the Land. And at the end, we'll provide the link so you can subscribe for more of these kind of conversations. Thanks for allowing me to do a special episode. Make sure you subscribe to this one and come on back. We are here to talk about the patriotism around real estate and how we get it back. And this is, of course, with the infamous industry disruptor who is apparently looking for attention, Rob Hahn, the Notorious ROB.
Yeah, because that's what I need in my life, more attention.
That was a pretty hilarious response to your pretty well thought out response to a statement that was made. So I don't know if it's attention seeking. You're just looking to create more conversation, which is why we're doing this.
Which is why we're doing this. And it's I think what we're talking about is, I believe, and again, I totally missed it because I don't, I'm not in the whatever loop.
You were on your way to a shooting competition with your wife. So it's probably wise that you didn't read that.
Right.
Going to something with your wife.
No, but and I think some of the accounts are probably blocked or something. Or they blocked me or something. So I don't see it. But I mean, I guess what's interesting is I never hear this from like average members. I only hear from people who are trying to climb the Realtor Association ladder, right? And all the criticism. And I'm sitting here like, you guys understand I'm actually trying to save you, right? Like, I think I've said this in person. I've said it on podcasts. I've said it in print. Like, the reason why I'm in real estate is because I love the Realtor Code of Ethics and the ideals of the Realtor, right? This is a great, or it should be a great organization, right? It isn't today, I believe. But like, who else cares about private property rights? Who else really has this sort of patriotic driven vision, mission? Again, we could start with a reading of the preamble if you'd want.
Wait, y'all can go back to episode 1 for that. We're not going to read it to you again. You go back to episode 1.
So I've been thinking about this for...
question though.
Yeah, go ahead.
You love the Code of Ethics. How many years ago was it we were supposed to have a retreat and do the Code of Ethics 2.0? Was that a decade ago?
That was a decade ago.
Or is it longer? It might have been longer.
I think it was like a decade ago. But what's interesting is at that point, we weren't messing with the preamble, right? We weren't messing with the ideals. We were saying, here are some suggestions for how to improve it, right?
Make it stronger.
And I believe none of those were ever implemented. I think there were some promises to look into it, to another PAG or research group. And, like some of our provisions, some of their suggestions then, I think could be done now. Do you remember the conduct on becoming clause conversation?
No, I do not.
So this was long before like speech code, right? This is before any of that. And I think the proposal from our little brainstorm was, why don't we have a clause right? That's just a broad catch-all clause that says, if you engage in conduct on becoming a realtor, that's a code of ethics violation. And we left it broad that way because I remember the scenario was there have been situations where, like, the one that I know of, because Sonny told me about it, was a realtor having an affair in a listing, basically having a date with his, mistress or whatever.
Amour.
Right? In the client's empty listing, right? And then getting busted. Now, is that illegal? No, it's not illegal, right?
Is it gross? Yes.
It's really gross. Does it violate any existing code of ethics provision? It does not, right?
Well, I mean, it could if he was having an affair with a fellow realtor, because that could be failure to cooperate if he then says no later. So you could really go into Article 3 maybe if you stretch it, but
right.
But then you realize now in the environment we're in where everything does get nitpicked, you couldn't have something overly broad because it would be abused by the wrong people on a grievance panel, which is the whole point of what you've said about the speech code, is that it's the structure that causes it to go sideways when we all know we do expect each other to behave well and we do expect our profession to be protected. But the reason I poked at that is you're talking about NAR as something you want to save by making it stronger, just like we've been talking about for the Code of Ethics for a decade. We want it to exist and be made stronger, and you only get there when you realize where your flaws are.
Right. This has become really, I think, more important, if you will, right? Because I think there's a lot of self-deception going on, or a lot of refusal to deal with reality, right? Which is that, look, the NAR settlement that they did in Sitzer is a big deal. I don't think people have quite grasped, the full implications of that. Because what that settlement essentially did is it removed compensation from the MLS. Okay, if you no longer have compensation in the MLS, then it leads to things like we're starting to see. And I saw this coming back in 2019, et cetera. And I'm like, just take one example, the Compass Anywhere acquisition that has everyone like, oh my God. Well, that's 25% of Realtor members who no longer can, and the MLS no longer guarantees compensation for them, right? Okay, well then why belong? Of course, today there's, you need it because the data is there and it's easier, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, but technology is coming, right? Like, it's not that hard to create databases and create that sort of tool, right? That's really not the hard part. So unless there's significant reform, it's going to be a problem. The issue is, if the MLS starts to lose value and goes away, then what's the Realtor Association? Like, what's the value there? And over the last, I don't know, few decades, I think it's fair to say that the Realtor Association has not done a great job of having a value proposition that people would join, even if they didn't have to. So I'm sitting here like, but I don't want to lose that, right? Like, I don't want to lose Under All Is the Land. I don't want to lose the good things that the Realtor Association could and should be doing. So I'm trying to steer the industry back to taking a look at that. And now, of course, it gets attacked and you hate it. And I'm like, it's the exact opposite. Like, I love NAR.
Right.
I'd love to see it.
You have children. If your children are doing things that are going to hurt them, you call it out because you want them to not make the same mistakes you've made in the past. And then they're going to do it anyway, but you're still continually reminding, and you don't just say, just do whatever you want to do, which I feel like that's what we're being told by the setup right now, which is it's all fine. Everything's fine. But I think the reality, the settlement's going to hit, I guess it'll be in 26, because the agreement was that realtor dues couldn't change in 24 or 25. There was a 2-year period when the realtor dues could not change. So that's going to be up for grabs come 26 and 27. Are we going to see a dues increase for inflation purposes, or
who knows?
But if you have any kind of a dues increase, that's what's going to get the average member to finally say, wait a minute, do I need this? Which is, I think the organization is necessary, because if NAR is not there, something will fill the vacuum. And the question becomes, who is that? Is it Zillow or Homes.com, or maybe it's the Compass Anywhere group? But when I've been meeting with local associations doing strat planning, my question for them is always, what do you do to retain your members when the three-way agreement breaks? Because it will break. I just don't know when. I've been wrong for a couple of years now because I've thought it would already go. But that's all value proposition, because in the loss of the three-way,
Right.
you're not going to control any policy in DC from an 800-person board. You're barely going to have a voice at your state level unless you know your state rep and your state senator.
Right.
So the question is, what do they provide to their members? And as you look at the MLS getting attacked from every front, which I have a personal experience now with why I would never want to lose the MLS, but I'm paying attention to the old, well, you probably weren't in real estate at the time because you weren't married to Sonny at the time, but a long time ago when I was a young person in real estate, we went to the member meetings at the local board and brought flyers of our listings to trade and show to each other because the MLS was a book and you might have something that was too new to have been in that version, or it might be something that was pocket listing. So you would bring your flyers and share it. So everybody showed up because it was like a swap meet.
That's right.
What do you have? What do you have? And it was good because it was good conversation, but it was a painful and slow way to get the information that would help your buyers or sellers.
Right.
But there's a value in that community of shared information. And it's not even MLS. It's me talking to another realtor.
There's so many layers to that. But I think in my article, that I wrote another article, I think in response to CEO of a major local association. And one of the things I pointed out is like, maybe it's because I grew up in the church. Like both my parents are Methodist ministers. So I look at realtor associations a lot sort of similar ways, right? So what you just described is, to me, like, let's say I belong to a really vibrant, local church, right? And I love going to church because I'm going to meet potential clients there. Maybe there's like a formal, we're going to get together and do a swap meet, and trade, or, say, hey, I have this, HVAC, anybody want it? Or that's a really nice benefit of belonging to that church. But that's not the purpose of the church.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying?
That's
so
true.
in a similar, I'm like, look, it's perfectly awesome if a realtor association, has events and has, I'm going to bring my flyer. We're going to do business together. That's totally fine. I'm not against any of it, but that's not the purpose of the realtor association, right? Which brings us to kind of why we're doing what we're doing. Like, I want just trying to remind people there's a real reason why NAR was created, why the realtor association exists. Right now, I think we're going through a bit of a debate within the industry. And I think that's a wonderful, healthy debate to have, because one of the people that commented on my post is Doreen Roberts, who's a realtor, long time. And she's the person who created the kind of the code of ethics video, right, on YouTube. Everyone should go look it up. It's awesome. It's like a history of like what happened. And her take really is that, realtor, the NAR and this whole origin story is not about patriotism. It's about professionalism, right? Whereas I'm saying, actually, it's patriotism first and professionalism in service to that. That is a reasonable disagreement, I think, for people who care, good people, to have, right? And I think that's kind of what I'm hoping it will happen. And what's not helpful in that debate and conversation is just name calling, denigrating, like Robert's attention. Believe me, I do not want attention. I have so many other things going on. I do not want any attention. But that's where we're at. And I think what you and I are trying to achieve with this is getting more of that going, right? Like,
because our members are smart. And so you think
Correct.
about how hard it is to survive in real estate. And I can't stress this enough to people. They fuss about, it's so easy to get in. The bar is too low, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. I love our low barrier to entry. I love that it's easy to get in. And I love that it's hard to survive. And the ones who survive, for the most part, are super hardworking and creative.
Right.
And they actually want to have these conversations because they're already having them in the bar.
Right.
And they're having them over text, but they're not allowed to have it out loud in an association meeting because they'll get blackballed for it. And that's the reason we have to have these podcasts so we can talk about things.
That's right. That's right. And, that's the spirit. That's the hope. And I think we're touching on a whole bunch of like third rail topics, whole bunch of like, you can't talk about that. That's forbidden. And I'm kind of like, I don't know, especially me, right? And I guess you more and more. It's like, I don't care, right? Like, this is.
I know, I'm learning to care less.
Yeah.
And that's the sad after effect of being blackballed. Is
that's right.
They wanted me to go sit down and shut up, and instead my skin's thicker.
Right. And I think that's, sort of the American way, right? Like, you're going to tell me to shut up? F you.
Okay.
Like, we're going to talk even more. It's going, Like, we're rebellious people, right? I get it. In any event, all right. So speaking of third rail topics, you want to talk about a specific topic that probably should be debated, should be discussed. So give it to us.
So I'm in Concord, North Carolina, which is a city just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. And sadly, Charlotte's been in the news a lot over the last month and a half.
Scotch. Yeah.
When you see this young girl get knifed to death on our light rail, and then you find out that her killer had so many prior arrests, and now after he got incarcerated, he gets sent to a mental health facility that is very nice. We're all pretty aware here in Charlotte that absolutely nothing will happen to him because there's this idea that it's compassionate to leave a man like that on the streets. I was on the phone actually earlier today with a state representative, and we were talking about an issue that's going on in the local school system. He was mentioning a lunch that he'd had with the county commissioner in Mecklenburg County, which is the county beside mine, and explained to the guy his wife won't go to uptown Charlotte now without him, and she definitely won't go by herself, even during the day. And my husband works in uptown Charlotte. He hates walking to lunch during the day because in a 2-block space, he's going to get accosted by homeless person after homeless person. Money, I need your phone, I need this, I need this. And he's a man with a sympathetic heart. But the reality is this: I don't care how kind you are. A woman by herself walking down the street who gets 5 or 6 different people coming up to panhandle, that's not safe. Because we all know that people who are homeless tend to have something associated with a mental crisis or a drug crisis, and that's not going to lead to generally good decision making. So the cities are not cleaned up, so you can't walk down our Skyline area in broad daylight at lunchtime during the week right now, and a lady gets killed on light rail, and your leadership says, nothing we can do about it, it's not kind. So I get to looking at this as a realtor, and when I'm paying attention to it, I notice that we have a lot of practitioners who know exactly what parts of town are not safe. They know what streets they cannot walk down. They know where they would tell a client, don't buy over there. That's just one of the things that happens. And so I'm trying to get somebody to help me pull a heat map on it, because I feel like there's a pretty neat overlay between crime rates in a city and the average price point.
Of course.
I feel like it would be pretty easy to show on a nice little Kamala Harris style Venn diagram that the cheapest houses are in the highest crime areas.
Of course.
Which means the people in those areas are not benefiting from house prices in the way that their fellow city people are. That's not good. It also means that somebody on a budget has to now choose, do I buy in an area where I'm not safe, or do I keep saving and just rent because I'm not willing to live over there? And so anytime a realtor engages in that conversation, they just admitted that it's okay somehow for some of their neighbors to live in a street where they're not safe, because people who live there aren't safe either. In Charlotte, the other big thing that hit was a 4-year-old got killed by stray bullets that were shot by 17-year-olds. Why was there not a big national outcry on a 4-year-old child getting gunned down by teenagers in a city that won't do anything about the teenage crime, which is our huge problem? And again, a realtor is aware of this, but we as a profession have not stood up for safety in the way that we've stood up for other issues. And the reason I come back to the realtors, I love fair housing. I think it's important that the realtors have been the biggest voice for the Fair Housing Act, because fair housing is actually not about check boxes as much as it is about, look, it doesn't matter what color you are, who you're sleeping with, or where you come from. You want to buy a house? Here's a pathway that we are showing the pathway to everybody. In the fair housing language, it says that fair housing means safe communities. It's in the language. It's in NAR's language when you pull up the posters that fair housing means we support safe communities. But when you bring it up, it suddenly turns into a polarizing issue where somebody says, well, you can't say that this side of town is safe and not safe. Well, to whom do I owe my duties? Am I beholden to an organization that says it's bad to admit that there's a part of town with higher crime? Or do I owe my fealty to the people who live there to say, man, I should call the sheriff because I don't feel safe showing a house on this street? Do I owe this responsibility to my buyers to tell them, you should be aware of the crime rate over here?
Right.
When I've been told I'm not supposed to talk about crime rates because Realtor.com, and I should looked up what year it was. It was like 18 or 19. They pulled crime stats off of their app because they said it was racist to show a crime rate.
Right.
Well, I don't understand that argument. And of course, I'm sure that somebody out there will say, well, it's because there's disproportionately this many people arrested. Well, I don't care. Look at the data. And if the data says there's crime there, the buyer, I think, has the right to know that.
Right.
And then I also made the point that if you assume a high crime rate is associated with a specific race, I'm not the one with the immediate problem. That might be the person who's yelling at me for saying it out loud. But why are we afraid to talk about crime and its impact on the people who want to sell their houses and people who want to buy houses, what it means to affordability? But more importantly, what does it say about our profession that we assume some parts of town aren't allowed to be safe?
I don't know if it's like government regulation, because that's kind of what I want to blame, that realtors will get in trouble if they talk too much about like crime in the quote wrong way, because unfortunately it's just facts. And I'm not a realtor, so I can say these things, right? It's just facts. There is unfortunately a high correlation between race and crime. There just is. I'm sorry, right? Like, we could talk about our legacy of racism. We could talk about we could talk about whatever the causes are. But fact of the matter is, high crime areas also happen to be high minority areas. Period. End of story. Right? And not high minority like Persians, not high minority like Chinese Americans. It's Black and Hispanic. Unfortunate. That's just the truth. That's just the reality. Everyone knows it.
And when we know it, why don't we want to solve it? Like, to me, we should want to solve it.
Yes. But the problem is, as a realtor, if you start saying, well, avoid that area, now you get into racial steering. So remember the Long Island thing that happened a few years ago?
Oh, 2019.
That's right.
Huge expose and needed.
Now, a bunch of those agents, I think, were really engaging in racial steering, like straight up, right? But others, I do wonder, were they really just trying to protect their client? Right? Listen, you want to avoid that part of town, right? And that was heard as, so the issue where the racial steering happens, I think, is they said that to white buyers and didn't say it to Black buyers, right?
And that's a problem. Because
that's a real problem.
That's
right?
a real problem, because
that's a real
the data,
problem.
If you treat the data as agnostic, then what you present that data as must also be agnostic.
Correct. But like, I think that's where the sensitivity comes from. You know this. Right. Like brokers.
I do know it, but it drives me nuts because there's neighborhoods in Concord. I can go there because I know the people who live there because I've lived here my entire life. I feel perfectly safe there. Right. But if you moved here 3 years ago and you drove through that neighborhood and you saw people sitting on the porches, you're going to start making up all kind of stories in your head, because that is the lowest price point part of town. They do have more crime in that neighborhood. I'm not worried about it, but I'm a local. And so the knowledge is also different based on how deeply embedded in a community you are. But by that same token, if somebody over there is getting held up, or I see drugs, or I see anything else, I am calling the police chief immediately saying, send somebody over here, because I don't want the old lady that I went to visit to be at risk. And there's so many layers to all of this, but at its heart, if the realtor's main role is to be the patriotic standard bearer for the American dream, is the person in a high crime area that's low cost, are they less worthy of a good American dream than somebody in a high price gated neighborhood?
Of course not.
So this is where I think realtors have to get bolder to say, look, I know it's a bad part of town, so what are we doing about it? Did you call? Did you go to city council, county commission and say, as a realtor, I don't feel safe over here. I wish y'all would patrol these streets.
I think, if I may, so 100% agree with you. The issue is it's not enough. Like, again, for me, when I look at the preamble, it talks about functioning cities.
You're not functioning if you can't walk outside.
Right. And it talks about survival of civilization, broad ownership, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So I don't think it's simply, I don't feel safe in this area. Right. To me, the true patriotic realtor. I think the true patriotic realtor, we could talk about the nation, but let's drill it down. Right. Like, unless you're the president, unless you have national office, you know what? Your responsibility is not the nation as a whole, right? Your responsibility is like your community. And most realtors I know actually really do love and care about their community.
Agreed.
You know what I mean? They
Big
really
time.
do. Okay, so if you know that, and you know that there is this blight in your community, you know that there's this neighborhood or this area that is high crime, that is not safe, that is bad, right? Maybe you don't know what to do about that, right? Maybe you don't know the solution. It's really complicated. Fine, I get it. But shouldn't part of this be, I need to do whatever I can to try and fix that blighted part of the community, right? So I would start there, right? Start there. Okay, now what are the barriers in the way of trying to address the real problems, in that community, right? And then you could get into maybe some political, cultural discussions, differences, blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, if we're keeping focused on nobody wants this, right? Is there anyone in the world that says, you know what, I love having drug dealers on the street. I can't, I love the crime.
Well, there's politicians that have been saying that with this move that President Trump made to clean up D.C.
Sure.
And then sending the troops to Memphis.
Sure.
And the Fraternal Order of Police in Charlotte is asking for the National Guard here because the police force is just so decimated right now because of retirements. People don't want to work in the police force right now because they're not backed up. You can arrest a bad guy. The magistrates let him right back out, which is what happened to DeCarlos Brown, who killed Arena.
Right.
He had been let back out by a magistrate without even a degree. So the fact that she was a magistrate is scary. But the police have been handcuffed, so to speak, by the judicial system. So we don't have enough police. So they're asking for the National Guard. But then you have the usual suspects on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook saying, we don't need them here. Our city's fine. Right. Okay, so you said there's only 68 homicides so far this year. So that's normal for a city to have homicides. Do you hear yourselves? It's like we don't hear ourselves and we say some death is normal. Well, I mean, we all die. But that 4-year-old, it haunts me so much because obviously I'm a mom. Like that kid had not yet learned how to read and go run. And I mean, find out who he's going to be, what kind of a light he was. No chance at all.
Right.
Then you have this group in society that says we're okay with some people dying. Well, we shouldn't be okay with that. That means we got a broken human condition.
Sure.
But by the same token, as realtors, we should hear about a 4-year-old dying. And the association should say, we want there to be better policing in this community and better magistrates so that every street in our city is a place where somebody can come in and out of their house without fear.
100%. And so
I think we have a space in this. I mean, but look at our other cities, Portland,
Leigh, I get it.
Chicago.
I get it. But here's the issue. Like I said, we start with the premise that the patriotic realtor, to me, and realtors are all patriotic. If you're not patriot, then stop being a realtor. Like that's my position. Be a wonderful real estate professional. You know what I mean? Like take care of your clients. Do that. You don't care about national interest and the citizens. You don't care about patriotic. Cool. Don't be a realtor. Again, to me, it's just like a church. You don't have to be Christian. I'm not an evangelist, right? You don't. Just be a good moral person, right? Go live your life. Do that. You don't have to belong to and worship Jesus. Like that is not a requirement, right? But if you're going to join the church, then I'm sorry, you must be a Christian. Like you can't join the church if you're not. Like that's just kind of how I see it. So having said that, let's just assume all realtors are patriotic. They care about their community. They want what's best for their community, right? They want functioning cities. They want industry. They want all that. Okay. I think the tough part now is, all right, that's all true, but you are a realtor organization. You're not city government. You're not state government. You're not the government, right? What is your proper role as an organization, right? That becomes the challenge.
Every association will tell you right now, if I were to ask any association, what's your primary task, local, state, or national, anywhere in our ecosystem, they will say their number one job is advocacy. Right. And when I ask them what their number one advocacy job is, they're going to start talking about public policy as it relates to property rights, as it relates to elected officials. So here in our local association, they will do a candidate interview. They will invite all the candidates for city council, county commission to a venue. They will let the leadership and the Generally, the legislative or the government affairs committee can interview them and ask them questions. None of those questions, to my knowledge, and I've seen and advised a lot of associations on the questions, nobody's asking about public safety.
Right.
So is the advocacy role there to say to our candidates, as realtors, we care intently about every part of this community.
Right.
We don't believe that anybody who lives here should have to feel unsafe in their home. And we want buyers to feel good about buying everywhere, which opens up opportunities. Therefore, we need to know where you stand on policing, neighborhood policing, public safety. What are you going to do to make our streets safe? That's where we could play immediately. And we could do the same thing at the state and federal level. And it's not an immediate fix. It's definitely a pipeline fix.
Right.
But we could start by asking that question.
And Leigh, that's the destination that you and I are trying to get to with this podcast, right? You're right. Because to me, a realtor association that is patriotic, that cares about the community first and foremost, there's no question in my mind. Like if crime is a problem in the community, absolutely one of the questions you should be asking is, what's going on with crime? Right? Hey, if you win, as mayor or whatever, what are you going to do about crime? There's no question that would be like one of the most important things. However, you and I both know the reason why we're doing this is because that's not how the association sees things. And a big part of it is because that's not how the members see things. And what I'm trying to say is like, look, we can't solve everything, but we could maybe try and get the members to rethink things a little bit. Here's what I believe. Because I've run into so many patriot realtors, right, in my time advising association, who deeply care about these issues, right? But what they seem to do is they say, okay, but that's over here, right? In my civic, whatever life, as church deacon or as just a mom or, whatever. But when I walk into the association, then only issues I care about are like property taxes, whatever, some property rights issue and, stuff that affects the commission or and I'm saying, no, it's not that. That's kind of what I'm trying to get to. If you go and read the preamble, understand what it says is we care about the nation, we care about the community, we care about functioning cities, we care about industry, we care about wide ownership, right? And because we believe that wide ownership of land leads to all those beneficial things, that's why we support, like the housing market. That's why we do what we do. That's why under all is the land, right? Like it's not the only thing that matters is the land. Like that's not how the preamble begins. It's under all is the land, right? But it's all, right? So I agree with you. But here's the thing. The members themselves are not recruited that way. They're not proselytized that way. They're not educated that way. Like, okay, I'm not.
But that's because you have two groups of members, though. And I think you're saying member referencing the ones who know who Rob Hahn is. And so you have the leadership circles, the connected realtors, the ones that are in the ecosystem that runs things, which is maybe 2% of our members.
Yeah.
And then you have the rest of the membership.
That's right.
And I think in the rest of the membership that is completely dialed out from this tiny little core,
that's right,
they are very interested in safe communities and crime and policing. And we look at the national polling data on this move to get our cities under control so they're not war zones. It's majority Republican, majority Democrat, majority independent. The majority of the American public says nobody should have to live in fear.
Of course.
So that means the bulk of our members would agree with us, but they're never going to have a voice because the leadership says, man, that's too difficult and dicey. I'm not going to touch it, which is where the disconnect come from.
No, well, so that's part of it. But I think the original crime, like I said, is the association and MLS were married too long.
Oh, totally agree.
Right. In other words, like, look.
Too hung up in these topics.
Well, here's the thing. Like, I completely get it. If I were an association executive, right, and you're telling me I own and control this monopoly that the real estate professional must have, and they have to now join me, then it just makes my life a lot easier. Do you know what I mean? And again, I look at it this way. In colonial times, right, it used to be the law that you had to go to church. Right, until, obviously the revolution, the Constitution, freedom of religion. like Massachusetts Bay Colony, if you did not go to church, you were fined, maybe imprisoned, like you had to go to church. It was official state religion, if you will. Well, hell, if you're a pastor of that church, man, it's easy, right? The money's going to come flowing in because you don't have a choice.
They're all here.
Right. But that weakens the church, right? Because now you're not concerned that much about your message or why you exist. And if you then went out and said, okay, you should join the church even though you no longer have to, right? It's weaker. I think the issue is if the Realtor Association, after say like 1960 or 1970, whatever, right? Like we got the laws passed, guys. We got the licensing law passed. We did a lot. And we got to give credit to realtors at NAR for pushing for licensing, for trying to make things better for consumers. 100%. After they got that done, imagine if the realtors at that point say, you know what? We need to spin off the MLS. Okay. Let the MLS go and do its thing, facilitating transactions, helping real estate professionals serve their clients. And we, the Realtor Association, need to get back to kind of idealism, right? And we're not.
Well, that's because, but at that time, though, when they had the idealism of creating the MLS and going broker to broker to say it's better if we cooperate, it was not the cash cow that it turned into with the explosion in membership.
Possibly.
And I think part of our issue is that they got very addicted to that revenue stream. And the ones who didn't, like, for example, my local sold our local MLS into the regional MLS years ago and learned how to recreate a community without having to have the MLS in the center of it.
Right.
I think we're stronger now than we were before.
Right.
But it definitely took time.
Right.
And it was the scariest thing for the leadership at the time.
Of course it is. Right.
How are we going to do without the money?
That's right.
No, you're fine if you have a good community.
Well, not only that, but I would just venture to say, I think it just makes you stronger. And if it means that you don't have some of the budget, fine, you don't have the budget, then stop doing stuff. Right?
Oh, yeah. Or maybe just break up some of these mega associations and go back to locals again. Maybe. That's what I'd love to see.
Yeah, maybe. But again, that's up to the membership. But what it does, though, then do to me is now your membership are the true believers. Now your membership are the people like, I really care about crime because I care about my community, right? And where can I go to like have some influence? Oh, the Realtor Association also cares about community. So you know what? They are going to go and ask local, politicians about what are you guys going to do about crime? I need to be part of that. And that becomes a voluntary thing. Well, you're not getting any benefits. You don't need to join the association to get the MLS or forms or lockboxes or whatever. I don't care. I'll get that over here, right? Let me go to the MLS and get all that stuff. I want to join the association because I care about my community and these issues.
Right.
If the majority of members were like that, then the leaders would be like that. But the sad reality is the majority of members today in every local realtor association that I'm aware of are not like that.
They're just tuned out. It's not that they're not like that. They're tuned out because they haven't received any value in so long.
Right.
They're numb to it.
Right.
But we did see at the end of the settlement in October of 23, there was a huge response from the regular realtor of, wait, what? What's going on? Because it was thrust on them to have to pay attention. And I said it as many times as I could. That was the most beautiful opportunity we've had in real estate in my lifetime to talk to members. Right. They raised their hands and said, talk to me.
Right.
And some associations responded with beauty, man. They were in person, webinars, Zooms, everywhere. They were responding and communicating. And not every part of Realtor World did that, which means it was the biggest missed opportunity in our profession's lifetime. Because if those people had tuned in and knew there was a place to have a voice, we can do that. That's what advocacy looks like. Sign me up.
Yeah.
Instead, they're told that advocacy means we're trying to keep the 1031.
Right.
Because we've been on the same talking points now for decades.
So I guess where I'll agree.
And I do want to keep the 1031 for the record.
Well,
that in.
Again, justified on patriotism grounds as I look at that, right? And that's how I'm saying. Like everything needs to be looked at through what's good for the country, what's good for the community. Not what's good for me, not what's good for my client, right? That's simplifying. So going back to it, I mean, of course we should talk about these things. If if the association is fundamentally a community, state, nation, patriotic organization, of course. But if it were, then it would go out of its way to make sure that the members are those people. And if they're not, that's okay. Do you know what I mean? That's okay. Just exit. Here's the MLS. Here's the lockbox. Here's the forms. Go be a wonderful professional. Right. So broadly speaking, I think the vision that I've had for the longest time is the profession needs to go to the MLS. And the calling needs to go to the Realtor Association.
Yeah.
Right? And I think one of the key moves here is we have to stop denigrating people who aren't realtors. Because you and I both know there's this sort of widespread kind of mindset. Oh, if you're not a realtor, you're unprofessional. Right.
Oh, but you know what my response is to that? I've got the best response to that.
What's that?
Okay, so most realtors will say what makes them different is the code of ethics.
Right.
And I said, okay, have you ever observed somebody breaking and violating the code of ethics? And they say, oh, yes. I said, okay. Did you turn them in? And they never turned them in. And I said, why? Because the same excuse always, I'll get punished later. They won't look at my offer. And I said, so you're willing to leave a bad actor in the profession who's going to hurt more people because you're scared of what exactly?
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, that's the whole problem is realtors have leaned on the code of ethics as their shield, but they haven't used the shield they have. If realtors had actually enforced the code of ethics and lived by it in a way that was visible to the consumer, you would have a far smaller core group of realtors because the non-realtors would self-select out, just like they'll self-select out if we are a patriotic organization.
Sure. But see,
you can't say we're any different. We don't enforce what we have.
No, here's the thing. Like, I've heard this now for the entirety of my career. People say, you know what we need to do? We need to raise dues to $2,000 a month. And then, you know, like all these unprofessional people would leave. I'm like, that assumes a couple of things. Number one, that assumes that the top producer is a professional, which is not always the case.
Correct.
There are some real scumbags who are top professionals, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you know it, I know it, everyone listening knows it, right? And there's some part-time soccer mom who is an amazing professional.
Amazing.
Right? So it's not about that. Okay. What is it also not about? It's not about like code of ethics, right? Like you could comply with every provision of the code of ethics and just be incompetent.
Of course.
What do you do about that? Right? And you say, well, that's a broker's job. That's somebody else's job.
That's right. Like, raise the bar. Fine. Just raise the bar.
Right. So my take on it at this point is like, look, it's real simple. Take everything professional, move it to the MLS. Right. Like maybe the MLS should have a professional code of conduct or professional requirements, whatever. Have that be over at the MLS.
That's already in place.
Right. And the licensing authorities, right? What the Realtor Association now does is you're all professionals. We're not looking down on you, but we over here are patriots. That's what distinguishes us, right? We're not better than you. We're not wealthier than you. We're not more ethical than you. We're simply patriots.
And we welcome you, but this is who we are.
Right.
We have foundational beliefs.
Right. That's right. And as a result, the difference would be the MLS, let's say the MLS comes up with a government affairs department, which I could see happening, right? And they're going to be
very necessary, actually.
Right. So maybe the MLS government affairs committee or whatever invites candidates in. And they're going to be asking the candidate, okay, well, what's your policy on tax policy? Tell me about your 1031 exchange. Do you support flood insurance? I'm like, wonderful. Do that over at the MLS. The Realtor Association are going to be like, how are you going to handle crime? Do you know what I mean? How are you going to handle...
Let's talk about eminent domain. Yeah, you get into some really interesting spaces. Right? I do love the idea of government affairs inside the MLS, though.
And then move the professional stuff over there. And move the non-professional patriot, like idealistic stuff to the association. Now, like you said, that's going to freak out realtor leaders. I get it. My take on it, though, is I actually think it will make the association way stronger. Right? And the example that I give, because I'm a gun owner, right? You are too, I believe, right?
Nobody will ever know unless they cross me.
Yeah. So in the firearm Second Amendment world, the NRA is sort of seen as a joke, right? It's kind of...
We blame Wayne. Wayne is part of the problem.
Wayne is a huge problem. But we look at the NRA and like, you guys have lost the thread, right? You guys are now just this giant bureaucracy, and all you care about is getting members. Like, it's unbelievable how much email and like mailers and offers and
the gifts are amazing.
They're really not. I could care less, right? But in other words, the NRA tries to sell itself as we do advocacy, but really just join as members and here's all these benefits you're going to get. Conversely, I also belong to places like GOA and Second Amendment Foundation and these groups. Their thing is, we have no value. Like, we have no gifts for you. We got nothing for you. But you know what we are going to do? We're going to go push the issue. And right now, I think the people who are members of GOA and SAF or the local state rifle association, whatever, those people are the true believers, and they are stronger, right? They're winning cases. They're having more of an impact. I see that potentially for realtor associations, right? Let the MLS handle all this other stuff. That frees us up to talk about things like crime. And if somebody, you guys are racist, whatever. We know we're not. Because in fact, we're anti-racist because we care about the black and brown people who live in that neighborhood, who are victims of the crime.
Every day.
Every day. We care about them. Apparently you don't, because you just want to keep silent about it. Like, maybe it's that, but just ignore that stuff and just go for what's good for the community, what's good for, the state, what's good for the, like, that would make the Realtor Association, I think, immensely powerful. Because what will happen is this. Okay, this is what I'm predicting. Maybe I don't think about any of this stuff. Okay, I just say, you know what? I think I want to try real estate. Okay? I'm going to get my license. I get my license. All right, they say you need MLS membership. Okay, I go buy MLS membership, and the MLS telling me, here's professional conduct. Here's what you got to do. Here's how you use the MLS. Here's how you submit offers. Here's what you got to do. All that stuff over here, right? And I'm doing well. Like, okay, I'm starting to be successful. It's really hard, like you pointed out, bust my ass, this and that. And I start to get a measure of success. I'm like, oh, this is great. And then I run to Leigh Brown, who says, okay, but do you care about your community? Well, actually, I do. Well, have you thought about coming to an association meeting? Well, I never did. Why would I? It's like, well, because this is where we talk about those issues. And I show up. And I'm like, oh my God, this is what I've been believing in. Right? This is what's important to me, actually. Now that I've been a realtor and I'm helping people buy and sell houses, I'm seeing things firsthand. And to have that opportunity, to have that place, and that associate says, we give you nothing. There are no benefits. You know what I mean? Like, but what we do is we give you the avenue for service.
The grassroots coalition of real estate.
I think that is
G-Corps.
Right. And again, I liken it back to the church. I don't know anybody who goes to church because they get a benefit out of it.
Actually, in some of those mega churches, there are little coffee houses and the concerts. But we're not here to talk about false teachers, so we can go down that road.
But I'm like, that's no one's going to church in order for because the church is giving away a keychain, or we have discounts.
No, but there are
cars.
churches in Charlotte and in Concord, and I won't call their name.
Right.
But it's the churches where you go to be seen because that's where the leaders are.
Sure. Yeah.
And so they're not there for the message or to bring a contrite heart before God or to worship. They are there to be visible. So we could also draw a parallel there.
But then the issue becomes, is that church, do they have true believing members?
Oh, they have some in there, but they don't know what's going on because they're not connected to the leaders. I can draw the perfect parallel to certain levels of association leadership because there are really good people in that church who are seeking a relationship, wanting to do good things. They just happen to be in there with the mugwumps, and the mugwumps are looking at each other, and they never see the regular person in the pew behind them because they were never looking at them. They were only looking at each other.
So obviously that's just human nature. I'm not even condemning. It's literally just saying, look.
It is, but it's so sad because I'm sitting here thinking, like, what got me involved in the association was when I first got invited to a government affairs committee. Somebody said, hey, you should come down here for this. I went in the room. They're talking about politics. I'm like, these are my people. My people exist in real estate. What? This is great.
Yeah.
And at the time, I see what we were doing in 2009 when I landed in that committee room. It was wildly necessary.
Yeah.
And then I fast forward to right now, and my local association, not my small local, but my big regional local, is all involved in the vote yes for the sales tax for infrastructure and bond money for light rail. They want a penny sales tax on an already burdened public.
Yeah.
For money that's going to wind up being a slush fund because there will be grift and fraud in that
Of
money.
course.
And the realtors are all in for it. And I said, I have to break from this. This is not the same stuff I signed up for. Because when I signed up to do realtor politics, it was about the grassroots, the property rights of everyone. If our money and our energy are being used for a penny sales tax to improve infrastructure, I have to look at who's funding the vote yes. And I look at where the infrastructure is going to go. It all benefits developers. Like, we're not supposed to be in bed with developers. We're supposed to be the ones who are like, let's go pro-con here.
I don't know. So, Leigh, that's to me, that is something that a honest, patriotic realtor can disagree with you on, right? Because again,
that we put all our money behind developers. I'm not in favor of all growth. Are you in favor of all growth?
Depends. So what I mean is, so here's what I'm getting at. We could disagree. I could probably make arguments why we should support a penny sales tax for more infrastructure. Here's my point, though. Well, my point is, when we disagree, we would argue based on, is this good for the community?
Correct.
Right? We would not argue based on, is this good for my business? Is this good for whatever?
No. It would be emotional.
It could be emotional. It could be whatever. But
only when you find out I'm right, because you're wrong on this. But I have to explain that to you later.
Of course.
I'll do a whole tweet thread on it.
But isn't that kind of the politics that we want in our country, period? Right? You're neighbors and you're both good people. You both want what's best for whatever. And you're making
and you have
arguments.
Vibrant conversations.
Right?
Yes.
And you're making arguments to each other like, this is what would be best for the community. No. This is what would be best for the community. And you know what? Reasonable people can disagree. That's the vision.
When they have at the heart of their disagreement the good and betterment of this amazing country.
That's right. That's
right.
right.
Right now, the reason we have to have this conversation on a podcast is there's not an agreement that everything in real estate is for the good and betterment of the country, for one.
That's right.
As we talked about in our other episodes. But two, that there's not room for more than one opinion in our rooms right now. And that has to change.
That does have to change. Right.
But now the environment says, raise your hand and say something.
Right.
And then the conversation goes from there. That's good.
Now, having said that, Leigh, I will say this, like, an organization association does at some point have to unify. So in other words, let's take this issue, right? And you go into the room and the committee, and it's all filled with other people like you, who care about the community. You just have an honest disagreement, right?
Yes, and I lose.
And you lose, right? You know what? At that point, you say, okay, cool, that's fine. We then, the association, are going to support this sales tax in order to build infrastructure. I'm going to get behind that, right? Maybe not with the same energy I would have had, but there does have to be some unity. And the next one, I'm going to win, right? Because...
Okay, so let me ask you a question on that.
Yeah.
If you're a leader and you're in charge of the conversation, then yes, you have to leave the room unified. This was our decision.
That's right.
If you are a grassroots member, are you saying the grassroots member is supposed to unify with the leadership?
In an ideal world, at least some degree, right? In other words, there has to be some level of respect and trust, right? Again, it's no different than... So my father did this all the time when he was a pastor. He would go and preach a message, right, that the congregation resisted initially, right? But you know what? Like, he felt like, this is what God is telling me. This is the message I need to preach, and this is what I need to do. And eventually the congregation gets won over, right? Like, there has to be the level of trust between the members and the leaders.
Right.
There has to be. And if you don't have it, then quite frankly, you should step down as a leader. Right?
Well, then that's what's missing right now. I think we are in a low trust moment in our association.
But with respect to Realtor Association specifically, there's an even deeper problem. Okay. How many, quote, leaders are actually leaders? Here's what, let me define
20%.
leader. Let me define leader this way. Okay. I don't think you could be a leader if you don't have followers.
I would agree with that.
Right. You can have
because they self-select their leaders to an extent.
Right. So you can have a position, But if you don't have followers, then you're not a leader. Right? And I think that's a problem with realtors specifically. Why? Because structurally, too many associations do this like nominating committee and then this and then that. And then you end up with somebody who's like a president, right? And here's how I know they're not a leader. The president says, you know what? We're going to do this. And the membership goes, fuck you. That's not a leader. In order to be a leader, you have to have followers. You have to have people who says, when you say we're going to go this direction, you know what? I don't know if I agree with you, but I'm going to follow you. Right? And there are people like that. And a lot of times they are shut out of leadership. Right? You and I both know this happens. That's a governance reform that needs to happen. And it can happen when the membership starts to modify, starts to change, starts to be like, wait, I thought we're about community service. I thought we're about patriotism. And you're not saying any of the things that I want to follow. So I'm not voting for you. I'm going to vote for this person over here who is saying things and I do want to follow that individual. Right?
Look at you assuming we have contested races. That was cool.
I know, right? I know. But in any event, all right. God, we spent an hour talking about it. So going back to the issue of crime, I will say this. There is one thing that I do think all realtor associations should maybe put on the map from an advocacy standpoint. I think I'm on record as saying, as much as I love kind of the Fair Housing Act, the interpretation of the Fair Housing Act that silences realtors, it silences real estate agents, maybe needs to be tweaked, right?
Well, that was Charlie Kirk's whole point, was that any of those acts had the best of intentions, but the practical application has fallen short.
Right. And but specific to real estate, I remember having this conversation with a buyer agent like 10 years ago in Texas. Okay. And he ended up being a good friend. As you can see, I'm Korean American, right? I'm riding around his truck. He's showing me houses. And I ask him, hey, where does one go for Asian groceries around here? He's like, I can't tell you. Because that would be racial steering.
No, you can answer that question, dude.
But you know what I mean? Like, that's how he was.
But yeah, that's the training he'd received.
And I'm literally telling him, listen, obviously, I'm asking you. Right? There's no invidious racial steering here. This is literally client service for you to tell me where the Asian grocery store is relative to this house, right? Similarly, when we're talking about the crime thing, it's not racial steering to be like, yo, that neighborhood is really dangerous. It's just not. So we're almost ignoring kind of the motivation, you know, and I get that it's hard to know what somebody's motivated by, right? But you
can generally tell, though. We generally have the intuition to know if somebody's a sleazeball, gross person, or if they're actually curious.
Correct. And I don't know how you handle that. You know, maybe it's an ethics hearing, maybe it's a licensing bureau. It's like, if you're telling every buyer, avoid that neighborhood, whether they're black, brown, white, it doesn't matter. That's one thing. If you're only telling white buyers avoid that neighborhood, then you're
the problem.
Then you're the problem, right? And somehow, I do think realtor associations should consider, is there a way of kind of dealing with that, right? Because a lot of that is regulatory, right?
But there is a very common situation that happens in my area, because we have so many Indians, as in from the Indian subcontinent. When they come here, they will ask, where are the Indian neighborhoods? I can't answer that question.
Right.
So they go to their friends and family. The friends and family say, oh, it's these 4 communities. These are the Indian neighborhoods.
That's right.
So then now they can maybe come back to me, but they got more information from their friend. So why call the realtor? Because they assume I hid it from them without understanding that there is a really nasty application of a pretty normal question, because obviously they're not asking because they have ill intentions. They're asking because they want to be in community with each other.
Of course.
And so you have all these different levels that go on. But again, because of Long Island, you brought it up before. And if you're watching and listening to this and you never read the report that Newsday put out, you got to go read it. It's absolutely insane.
Right. Read it and watch
even
the
more
videos.
insane that some of those instructors are still instructing, which is even more scary. But
read it and read it and watch the videos, right? Because I think that'll go a long way. Because there are a couple of videos, like I said, I felt like this doesn't seem like racial steering.
No, and there was that one kid who was like a new realtor. He got called in front of the New York State Senate and asked about what he did. He was so contrite, and you could tell he had done a bunch of research, and well, that was what I was told to say. And he got some better perspective on it. So not a bad thing, but
right.
So, but what it goes back to, something I mentioned, I don't know, an hour ago. If we are in a low trust society, of course we don't trust the intentions of the other person. So at a core, we have to go back to a high trust world that says, oh, obviously, if Rob's asking about Asian grocery stores, it's because he legit just wants to know. So I'm just going to tell him instead of always assuming the worst about the other person.
Right.
Maybe that's the core problem we have right now inside our application of things, is we assume the absolute worst instead of what I believe about the vast majority of our members. I believe that they have the best intentions of the public at heart.
Yes, I agree. And, look, I don't know what this, it's a complicated thing because who the hell knows?
Yeah,
but I will
layers.
say this. What is the coin of the realm if you are a realtor? What is absolutely essential for anyone to be an effective real estate professional? Forget realtor, to be an effective real estate professional. What I've been, because I'm not one, what I've been told by everyone I know, including my wife, ultimately comes down to trust. You must have the person, the buyer, the seller, they have to trust you. Okay. I think realtors, successful real estate agents, are very good at being trustworthy individuals. Not all, like we've said, some top producers are real scumbags, right? But if that's the high trust profession, maybe that profession could turn its eye towards how do we create more trust?
Right.
How do we do that? Right? I can serve as an example. Can I teach this? Can I show it somehow? Right? Instead of behaving in a way that engenders less trust. Like, I can't tell you that. What? What? So in any event, I don't, like I said, unless we say this is a solution, I don't think you and I are necessarily going to come up with the solution. I think
that's not our job here. Our job is to have a conversation so that some brilliant person out there says, I got an idea.
That's right. And feels free to then go to maybe the local association, go to their friends, go to their neighbors, go to their colleagues and say, hey, we should do this, right? And let's talk about it from the lens and the filter of, I'm a realtor. This is my preamp. This is my document. This is what exists. I'm going to act in those ways. I think that's the direction that we need to head in. And here's the thing. I genuinely believe this. I don't think the Realtor Association, as we know it today, survives what's coming. So this isn't even like, let's do this because it's optional. Like I'm saying, look, on the current path, the entire industry dominated by like 7 brokerages, and CoStar or Zillow is going to be the national MLS. And then where's the association? It's one of those things. So these are reforms and think conversations need to happen right now because that future is coming, whether we like it or not. It's not about liking it. It's like that future is coming. There will be a clear differentiation between real estate professionals over here and realtors. And right now, realtor is utterly meaningless. And we're trying to
Sadly, it is.
And we're trying to change that. So
bring it back.
If that means, the incumbents want to say we're just looking for attention and we're bad people, all right, whatever, fine.
Okay, that's fine. If that's what we're doing,
fine.
Then prepare a response. What do you think about this?
Right.
This is actually an everybody conversation. So what would NAR's position on crime and public safety be?
Right.
I would love to hear an NAR position statement on that.
I think that's a fantastic. Maybe there'll be a PAG.
You know what? I envisioned, do you remember that scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark when they're putting the Ark of the Covenant into that warehouse? That's all the PAG reports. There is a report from every work group in PAG in there. It'll never be seen again.
And that needs to change. So
it's back there with the danger report.
Oh my. In any event, wonderful chatting with you as always. Thanks everyone for listening to us yammer. And
share with a friend.
Yep.
Email us at info@underallpodcast if you want to have us talk about something. We promise to keep you anonymous, and we'll just chat on the air about it.
Or
hit us up in the comments. Tell your association leadership to chime in. And are we right or are we wrong? But regardless,
and for that matter, even if you don't want to, if you want to come on and just have a conversation, let's do that. Like, let us know if you want to.
100%.
If there's some issue that you deeply care about, and it is coming from a place of patriotic duty and the interest of the nation and citizens, we'll talk to you. Let's see how that goes. That's
and then I'll get a rubber chicken, because if we're going to have guests, we get to use a rubber chicken to end them. I've always wanted to do that.
All right.
All right. Make sure you hit the bell to subscribe. We'll see you.
All right. Ciao.
I can't wait to hear what y'all thought about that long conversation, because I probably should have disclosed that Rob and I can't say anything in 5 minutes or less. But share with me in the contents what you felt about that episode, and if you feel this is the kind of conversation we should be having, or if you have some of the answers that Rob and I don't have. Most importantly, check out more of these conversations at youtube.com/underallpodcast, and share this with your fellow association junkies in real estate leadership. It's far overdue for us to have uncomfortable conversations, because that's going to protect and preserve real estate for every citizen in the United States now and in the future. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.